It was fight night in Las Vegas. The T-Mobile Arena pulsed with energy, the thud of bass-heavy music, the roar of fans lining up at the gates, the smell of popcorn and adrenaline mixing in the air. Inside, the UFC's biggest card of the year was minutes away from starting. Every VIP in town was here, or almost here. Manny Pacquiao's black SUV rolled up to the VIP entrance, its tinted windows reflecting the flashing lights of the Strip. Dressed simply in a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, Manny wasn't here for attention. He was here to support a young Filipino fighter making his UFC debut, a kid who had grown up idolizing him. The door opened, and Manny stepped out. He adjusted his blazer and walked toward the entrance, Jinky right behind him, smiling politely at a few fans who had spotted him. Then it happened. A tall, broad-shouldered security guard in a black polo stepped in front of him. "Sir, this entrance is for VIP guests only," the guard said firmly, holding out a hand. Manny smiled, assuming it was a simple mix-up. "Yes," he replied. "I have a pass. My name is Manny Pacquiao." The guard didn't flinch. "I'm gonna need to see ID, no problem." Manny reached into his pocket and handed over his VIP credential, the same kind of lanyard dozens of other celebrities had flashed without issue. The guard studied it for a moment, then shook his head. "This doesn't look official. I'm going to need you to step aside." Jinky's smile faded. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. "This is Senator Manny Pacquiao. He's here as a guest of Dana White." The guard folded his arms. "Ma'am, I don't care who he is. Rules are rules. If his name's not on my list, he's not getting in." A small crowd began to gather. A few fans whispered, some already raising their phones to record. Manny could have been angry. He could have raised his voice, but instead, he just stood, there quietly, studying the guard. Years in the ring had taught him that sometimes the best first move is no move at all. "Sir," Manny said gently, "maybe you can call someone inside to confirm. I don't want to cause trouble." The guard shook his head again. No exceptions. Behind Manny, more VIPs were being waved through without so much as a glance at their credentials. An actor from a hit TV series walked past, grinning, the guard offering him a cheerful, "Welcome, sir," before blocking Manny again. The whispers grew louder now. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Does he not know who that is?" Another fan called out, "That's Manny Pacquiao! Let him in!" Still, the guard stood his ground. Inside, the lights dimmed. The first fight of the night was moments away. Manny checked his watch. If this went on much longer, he'd miss seeing his young friends walk to the octagon. Jinky leaned in. "Manny, should we just go around to another entrance?" Manny shook his head. "No, this isn't about the entrance." His eyes drifted to the growing crowd, to the kids in Pacquiao shirts watching with wide eyes. This was becoming something else, something bigger than a misunderstanding. At that moment, a shout came from inside the VIP lobby. "Manny!" Heads turned as UFC President Dana White himself strode toward the door, flanked by two assistants. His bald head gleamed under the arena lights, his voice cutting through the noise. The guard stiffened as Dana approached. "What the hell is going on here?" Dana barked. The guard quickly explained, holding up Manny's credential like a piece of suspicious evidence. "It's not on my list. Could be fake." Dana's face went red. "Fake? That's a world champion. Boxer. That's a Hall of Famer. That's my guest." The guard opened his mouth to respond, but Dana didn't give him the chance. "Step aside. Now." The crowd erupted in cheers as the guard reluctantly moved out of the way. Manny smiled politely, offered the guard a respectful nod, and walked through the entrance with Jinky. But as the doors closed behind him, the story wasn't over. Manny could feel the weight of the moment. The incident had been filmed. It was already hitting social media. People would talk, not just about the guard's mistake, but about how Manny handled it. And Manny knew exactly what he was going to do next, before. We continue with the story. Tell us where you're watching from. If you like this story, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have a special story for you. The muffled roar of the arena washed over Manny as he and Jinky followed Dana White through the VIP corridor. Dana glanced back at him. I'm sorry about that, champ. That guy's new. He probably didn't even watch boxing. Manny smiled faintly. It's okay, Dana. He's just doing his job. I'm not angry. But in truth, he wasn't brushing it off entirely. Manny knew how these things worked. A clip like that, showing a security guard blocking him, would spread like wildfire. Online. And people wouldn't just see a mix-up. They'd see a legend, disrespected. For Manny, it wasn't about ego. It was about the message. How you respond when someone tries to diminish you says more than any victory in the ring. The corridor opened into the VIP lounge. Plush leather couches, dim golden lighting, waiters gliding silently between tables. This was where the night's elite were relaxing before the fights. Heads turned as Manny walked in. A few celebrities offered nods of recognition, some coming over to shake his hand. But Manny's attention was on the young fighter he'd come to support, Jay Cruz, a 22-year-old Filipino bantamweight making his UFC debut. Jay sprang up from his seat, eyes wide. "Sir Manny, you made it!" They embraced, and Manny clapped him on the shoulder. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it." Jay hesitated, glancing toward the entrance. I saw what happened out there. Someone showed me a video already." Manny chuckled softly. "The internet is faster than a left hook." Jay frowned. "I can't believe they stopped you. If that was me..." Manny held up a hand. "No, don't think that way. In life, people will test you. How you respond matters more than what they say or do. Remember that." Jay nodded, trying to absorb the wisdom. Minutes later, the arena lights dimmed and the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to UFC Fight Night," the crowd roared. Manny and Jinky took their seats in the front row, just behind the octagon. The early fights were exciting, but Manny's mind kept drifting back to the security guard. He thought about the look on the man's face, that unshakable certainty, that Manny didn't belong there. How many times had regular people faced the same thing without the luxury of having a Dana White to step in? An idea began to take shape. 2 fights later, Jay's name was announced. The arena filled with cheers as he walked to the octagon, the Philippine flag draped over his shoulders. Manny stood, clapping loudly, pride in his eyes. Jay fought with the kind of fire only a debut fighter can have. Relentless, fearless. He took a few hard shots, but he kept moving forward, landing crisp combinations. By the second round, he had his opponent on the defensive. Then it happened. A lightning fast left hook followed by a right cross that landed flush. The referee jumped in. The fight was over. Jay had won by knockout. The crowd exploded. Manny found himself grinning ear to ear. After the fight, as Jay was being interviewed, Dana leaned over to Manny. "Want to come backstage?" Manny shook his head. "Not yet. I need to do something first." Manny excused himself, slipping out of the VIP section and making his way back toward the main entrance. The fights were still going on, so the concourse was quieter now. The same. Security guard was at his post, scanning tickets. His posture stiffened when he saw Manny approaching. "Sir, the guard began, clearly unsure of what to say. Manny extended his hand. "Thank you for doing your job earlier. I know it wasn't easy with the crowd watching." The guard blinked, surprised. "You're not mad?" Manny shook his head. "No, you followed your rules. That's important. But sometimes rules can make us forget to see the person in front of us." He pulled a small envelope from his pocket and handed it over. "This is for you. 2 tickets to the next big fight here, VIP seats. Bring someone you care about." The guard looked down at the envelope, then back up, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Mr. Pacquiao. I didn't know. I just thought it's okay," Manny interrupted with a warm smile. "Now you know." A fan walking by recognized the scene and began filming. This time, the video wasn't about a guard blocking Manny Pacquiao. It was about a guard shaking hands with him, smiling, receiving a gift. By the time Manny returned to his seat, his phone was buzzing with notifications. The new clip was already circulating. Manny Pacquiao returns to thank the guard who stopped him. Comments poured in. This is why he's a legend. Not just a champion in the ring, a champion in life. He could have embarrassed that guy, but he chose grace. Manny watched the fight in front of him, but deep down, he knew this moment, not any punch thrown tonight, would be what people remembered. Somewhere out there, a young fan would see the video and learn something important. That dignity isn't in how loudly you demand respect, but in how quietly you give it. The sound of the crowd inside the arena pulsed through the walls, but Manny wasn't focused on the fights anymore. He could feel his phone vibrating in his pocket every few seconds. Jinky glanced at him, noticing the faint smile on his face. "You've seen it already, haven't you?" she asked. Manny nodded. "Someone sent me the video. It was only 20 seconds long, a shaky clip captured on a phone, but it was already everywhere." The footage showed him walking back to the entrance, shaking the security guard's hand and handing over the tickets. No music, no editing, just a small gesture that somehow carried more weight than any knockdown he'd ever delivered. By the time the main event started, sports blogs were already picking it up. On Twitter, people who had no interest in boxing or UFC were sharing it, using words like class, humility, and true sportsmanship. It was as if the earlier clip of him being stopped had simply been erased by the new one. But Manny wasn't chasing viral moments. He had lived long enough to know that internet attention came and went like a gust of wind. What mattered to him was what lingered in people's hearts after the wind passed. As the final fight ended and fans began to pour out of the arena, Dana White came over, slapping Manny on the back. "Champ, I've got to hand it to you. Most guys in your position would have been furious. You turned it into a Hall of Fame moment." Manny just chuckled. Hall of Fame moments happen in the ring. This was just life. Dana shook his head. "Nah, it's the little things that stick with people. You'll see." Backstage, Jay Cruz was still riding the high of his knockout win. Cameras and reporters surrounded him, but the moment he spotted Manny, he waved them aside. "Sir Manny, you saw it?" "I saw it," Manny said, grinning. "You fought like a warrior." Jay's voice dropped, more serious now. "I also saw what you did for that guard. That's different. That's not something everyone would do," Manny shrugged. "When I was young, I was stopped many times. At gyms, at events, even at the airport. I didn't look like I belonged, so people assumed I didn't. Maybe tonight that guard will think differently next time." Jay nodded slowly, understanding more than Manny realized. They spoke for a few more minutes before Manny and Jinky slipped out through the side exit. The city air outside was cool, carrying the distant echo of cheering fans. Their driver opened the car door, but before Manny stepped in, a man approached, tall in a security jacket. "Mr. Pacquiao?" It took a moment for Manny to recognize him without the stern expression from earlier. It was the guard. "I just wanted to thank you again," the man said. "Not just for the tickets, but for not making me look bad. I was just following the rules. I didn't realize," Manny interrupted with a gentle pat on the shoulder. "It's all right. Maybe next time you'll realize faster. We all learn." The guard smiled sheepishly. "I'll see you at the fight?" "You will," Manny said, then got into the car. On the ride back to the hotel, Jinky rested her head against the seat. "You know, you could have easily let that moment pass, but you went back. Why?" Manny looked out the window at the blur of city lights. "Because sometimes the fight isn't in the ring. Sometimes it's in the way you choose to treat people when you don't have to." By morning, Manny's phone was overflowing with messages from friends, reporters, even people he hadn't heard from in years. ESPN wanted to run the story. Local news outlets in the Philippines had already translated it. One headline read, "Manny Pacquiao shows champion's heart outside the ring." But what made him smile the most was a message from a high school teacher he'd never met. It read, "I showed the video of you with the security guard to my students today. We were talking about kindness, and they couldn't believe someone so famous would take the time to go back and thank someone who stopped them. I think you taught them something they'll remember longer than anything in my lesson plan." That, to Manny, was worth more than any belt. Later that day, Dana White called again. "Manny, listen, I was thinking, how about you come to the next UFC event as an honored guest? We'll make sure there's no mix-up this time. Red carpet treatment." Manny laughed softly. As long as I can still walk in through the front door. There was a pause. You serious? Dana asked. Very. The front door is where people need to see you. Not just the VIPs, everyone. When he hung up, Manny thought about the guard, about Jay, about the thousands of fans who would see him at the next fight. He didn't plan to make a speech or give interviews. He would simply show up, shake hands, smile, and be present. Because sometimes the greatest comebacks don't happen in a ring or an octagon. They happen in quiet moments when the world gives you a chance to prove who you really are. And you take it. 3 weeks later, the night air outside Madison Square Garden was electric. Bright lights splashed across the street as fans lined up for one of the biggest UFC cards of the year. Across the crowd, phones were raised, voices shouted, and the energy pulsed like a living heartbeat. Manny Pacquiao stepped out of the black SUV and into the cool evening. He wasn't wearing a suit, wasn't hiding behind sunglasses, just a dark bomber jacket, jeans, and that unmistakable smile. Jinky walked beside him, effortlessly elegant in a cream blouse, waving politely to the fans who recognized her. He could have gone through the private entrance Dana White had offered. In fact, the driver had even been instructed to park near it. But Manny had told him to stop right here, in front of the main doors, where ticket holders and die-hard fight fans stood in line. People began to notice almost instantly. Wait, is that Manny Pacquiao? Someone whispered. Then louder, it's Manny. A ripple moved through the line as cameras came up and strangers stepped aside to make room. At the doors, the same security guard from that unforgettable night was on duty. He spotted Manny, and his face broke into a grin so wide it looked almost unreal. Mr. Pacquiao, the guard said warmly, I was hoping I'd see you again. You told me I'd see you at the fight, Manny replied, extending his hand. Here I am. They shook hands, and this time, instead of stopping him, the guard reached into his pocket and pulled out something unexpected, a laminated guest badge. You don't need this for the main doors, he said, but I wanted you to have it anyway. My way of saying thanks. Manny accepted it with a nod. I appreciate it, but tonight I'm walking in with everyone else. The guard laughed. I figured you'd say that. Go on in, champ. Welcome back. As Manny and Jinky stepped through the turnstiles, the crowd around them began clapping. It wasn't a roaring stadium cheer, just a warm human moment. People reached out to shake his hand, slap his shoulder, or simply tell him, "You're a legend." Inside, Dana White was waiting near the entrance to the floor seating. You seriously came through the front? He said, shaking his head. Told you, Manny replied. That's where the real fans are. They walked together toward the octagon, pausing every few steps as fans stopped him for selfies. Manny never rushed them. Every handshake was firm, every smile genuine. Halfway to his seats, a young boy wearing oversized UFC gloves tugged at Manny's jacket. Mr. Pacquiao, my dad says you're the greatest boxer ever. Is that true? Manny knelt so they were eye to eye. The greatest boxer is the one who works the hardest and never gives up, he said softly. That can be you. The boy's face lit up like he'd just been handed a championship belt. When the fights began, Manny's presence didn't overshadow the athletes in the cage. He didn't want it to. He was there to watch, to respect, to enjoy. But between rounds, cameras panned to him on the Jumbotron, and the crowd erupted each time. In the middle of the second bout, the guard from the door slipped into the aisle, catching Manny's eye. He mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Manny nodded, lifting his hand in a small wave. He knew exactly what that meant. Sometimes the moments that matter most aren't the loud ones. They're the ones you feel, the ones that change the way someone sees the world. By the end of the night, Manny had taken more pictures with fans than some fighters take punches in their careers. As he left the arena, walking once again past the same main doors, people still called out his name. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Because for Manny Pacquiao, the real victory was already his. Not in the octagon, not in the ring, but in the hearts of the people who'd watched him walk in and remembered the way he'd walked out. The morning sun crept through the curtains of Manny's New York hotel suite. He was already awake, sitting at the small table by the window, sipping black coffee. Jinky emerged from the bedroom, still in her robe, hair loosely tied back. "You've been quiet all morning," she said, walking over. "Thinking about the fights?" Manny shook his head with a faint smile. "Not the fights." He turned his phone toward her. The screen was filled with headlines. Pacquiao enters UFC arena, like a true champion, through the front door. From boxing legend to people's hero, Pacquiao's UFC night wins over fans. Security guard reunites with Manny Pacquiao in heartwarming moment. Beneath the articles were hundreds of social media posts, photos of Manny shaking hands, smiling with fans, and even kneeling to speak to the little boy in the UFC gloves. One tweet read, "You can't fake class. Manny Pacquiao just proved why he's a champion in and out of the ring." Another had a side-by-side of him being stopped at the door weeks earlier and then walking in last night with the same guard smiling beside him. The caption simply said, "Growth." Jinky scrolled through silently for a moment. "You know, you didn't have to do any of this," she said softly. "But now it's all anyone's talking about." Manny leaned back in his chair. "People forget fights. They don't forget how you make them feel." A knock came at the door. Their assistant, Ron, opened it to reveal a hotel staff member holding an envelope. "For Mr. Pacquiao," he said. Manny thanked him and broke the seal. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Mr. Pacquiao, I wanted you to know, last night was one of the best nights of my career. Not because of the fights, but because I got to see you walk through those doors again, this time by choice. You made me realize something. The way we treat people at the door matters as much as what happens inside. I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. Mike, UFC Security." Manny read it twice, then set it on the table. "Mike," he murmured. "Mike?" Jinky asked. "The guard," Manny said simply. He didn't reply to the note right away. Instead, he decided to walk down to the lobby later that afternoon. Sure enough, Mike was there. Not in a jacket this time, but in a crisp black polo, with the UFC logo. When he spotted Manny, his face lit up like an old friend seeing someone after years apart. "I didn't think you'd come down here," Mike said. "I read your note," Manny replied. "I just wanted to say, I think you're going to be the kind of man who makes people feel welcome, no matter who they are." Mike's voice caught for a moment. "I'll try, sir. You've shown me how." They shook hands again. Not the formal grip from weeks ago, but something warmer. That evening, Manny and Jinky strolled through Times Square like any other tourists. People recognized him, of course, but instead of shouting champion or boxer, many simply said, "Thank you." One man even stopped him in the crosswalk. "I saw the video of you with the guard. My daughter watched it too. She asked me why you didn't get mad. I told her, because some champions fight with their hearts." Manny smiled, then crossed the street as the lights changed. Later, back at the hotel, he scrolled through one last video. Not of himself, but of Mike at the door greeting fans. He wasn't just checking tickets anymore. He was smiling, shaking hands, and even helping a man in a wheelchair navigate through the crowd. Manny put the phone down and looked out the window at the city lights. The fight was over, but the victory, the real one, would keep growing. Long after the cameras stopped rolling, the airplane touched down in Manila just after sunrise. Golden light spilled across the tarmac as Manny Pacquiao stepped off the private jet, the familiar warmth of home wrapping around him like a blanket. The air smelled different here, humid, rich, alive. No skyscrapers towering above, no flashing billboards. Just the sound of jeepneys rattling down the road, roosters crowing in the distance, and people beginning their day. A small crowd had gathered at the airport. Not for a press conference, not for a fight. Just neighbors, friends, and locals who'd heard the champ was coming home. They waved, some holding small banners with his name, others holding up phones to capture the moment. Manny waved back, smiling, but he noticed something unusual. Several people were wearing UFC shirts, not something you often saw here. A teenage boy stepped forward shyly, holding out a folded piece of paper. "I printed this from the internet," the boy said. Manny opened it. It was a screenshot from social media. The side-by-side of him being stopped at the door weeks ago and walking in with the smiling guard days later. Beneath it, in bold letters, it said, "Respect doesn't need titles." "My teacher showed us this in class," the boy continued. "She said it's about humility. I just wanted to say thank you." Manny felt a small lump in his throat. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jomar," the boy replied. "Jomar?" Manny said with a smile. "One day, you'll be the one people look up to. Remember, it's not about how you enter. It's about how you treat people along the way." Jomar grinned, clutching the paper like it was a championship belt. Back at his home in General Santos City, Manny settled into a quieter rhythm. Mornings were for training lightly, not for a fight, but for himself. Afternoons were for spending time with Jinky and the kids, catching up on the moments he'd missed while traveling. But the UFC story kept following him. Local newspapers ran pieces not about his boxing titles, but about his door moment. Radio hosts replayed the audio clip of him telling the guard, "It's okay, I'll wait like everyone else." Community leaders even used the story in speeches about patience and dignity. One Sunday after church, Manny and Jinky visited a small fishing village hit hard by a recent storm. The families there didn't have much: broken boats, damaged homes, but they still greeted him with laughter and food. Over a shared meal of grilled fish and rice, one elderly man leaned in and said, "We saw the video. You waited in line. You didn't push through. That means you understand us. We wait every day, for rain, for work, for food. Now we know even a champion waits." Manny didn't respond right away. He just reached across the table and shook the man's hand. That night, sitting outside under a sky full of stars, Manny thought about all of it. The first time at the UFC door, the guard's change of heart, the headlines, the boy at the airport, the fisherman's words. He realized this wasn't just a story about being let into an arena. It was about something much bigger. Some people fight to be seen, others fight to be remembered. But the greatest fight of all is the one to remain humble, no matter how high you climb. And that, Manny knew, was a fight worth winning every single day. 3 months had passed since that night at the UFC arena. Manny had gone back to his training, charity work, and family life in the Philippines. The story had lived its own life online, traveling far beyond anything he could control. One afternoon, an email arrived in his team's inbox. It was from the UFC's main office. "Senator Pacquiao, we'd like to invite you back to Las Vegas for a special guest appearance at our upcoming event. We have someone here who's been hoping you'd come." Manny didn't need to ask who. A week later, under the buzzing lights of the T-Mobile Arena, Manny stood backstage. The roar of the crowd was like thunder rolling through the walls. Fighters were warming up, gloves snapping against pads, coaches shouting instructions. Then the event director appeared. "He's waiting for you," she said with a smile. They led Manny not to the VIP section, but to the very front doors. And there he was, Mike, the security guard, standing tall in his black suit, scanning tickets with the same calm focus as before. But when he saw Manny, his face broke into the widest grin. "You came back," Mike said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I told you I'd walk through these doors again," Manny replied, in front of dozens of fans waiting to get. Inside, they shook hands. But then something unexpected happened. Mike took off his earpiece, stepped aside from his post, and hugged Manny like an old friend. The crowd erupted into cheers, phones flying up to capture the moment. One voice from the back shouted, "This is the fight of the year," and laughter rippled through the line. The UFC camera crew had been filming the whole thing. Inside the arena, before the main event, the footage played on the giant screens. The crowd watched as the clip cut from their first meeting, tense, awkward, to their handshake weeks later, and now to this moment. When it ended, the entire stadium stood on its feet, not for a knockout, not for a championship belt, but for respect. Mike leaned in and said quietly, "You didn't just change my night that day. You changed how I see people." Manny put a hand on his shoulder. Then that was the real win. As the announcer's voice boomed and the lights dimmed for the first fight of the night, Manny took his seat. No gloves, no ring, no scorecards. But still, a champion in every sense of the word. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't fought under bright lights. They're won in the quiet moments, at the doors we choose to walk through, and how we treat the people guarding them. And on that night, everyone in the arena, from the fans in the cheapest seats to the fighters backstage, knew they had just witnessed one of those victories.